Hello, this is Christopher Chesterman, and I'm here to talk to you about liberty and freedom. Essentially, freedoms are what I can do as an individual on any given day at any given time, whereas liberties are the rights granted to me by the government under which I live at that given time. Now, I'm going to use secession in relation to the United States Civil War as an example. Secession itself was the established constitutional interpretation all the way up to 1860. States could nullify federal laws that they thought were unconstitutional. They could disregard Supreme Court rulings that they disagreed with. And some states even toyed with the idea of leaving the Union for these various issues, but they all kind of went away fairly quickly, so there was no need to leave the Union. However, this was because each state was considered its own country, even by foreign powers, upon the formation of the United States. This in turn created a balance of power issue, because too much power can lead to despotism, but also not enough power can lead to despotism, because the country can fracture and people will look for a unification element, as happened with the French Revolution. And so this applies to secession because it was about the freedom of the states to secede on their own versus the government's ability to grant it or give them the liberty to leave the Union. And this was essentially over the issue of slavery, or the ability for slaves to go from slave states to free states and remain slaves. And I think at the heart of the issue was, if a slave had a child in a free state, would that child be a slave or free? Because they're allowed to be a slave, that's bringing more slaves into a free state. But if they are declared free, then that violates the idea of slaves being property of the slave owner. Now, both sides of the issue cited freedom as their ultimate goal. Lincoln as freedom for the individual. More freedom would lead to greater demand for labor and better wages. Davis was more of a free market kind of guy. Open trade would generate more money for everyone later on. Lincoln was about the here and now, freedom here and now for everyone. Davis was, let's restrict ourselves now so we can sacrifice and get more later. Now, Matsuvinos describes very well through graphs how liberty works within a government. The greater the number of districts of jurisdiction, the greater the direct individual freedom. And also, the greater both of these are, the higher the exit cost is. So in America, there are already various levels of jurisdiction, so the exit cost for the Confederacy was going to be very high, whether there was a fight or not, to be honest. And also, indirect individual liberty goes down when those two other things go up. But that's because there's already so much that much less is implied. But that means indirect individual liberties go up when there are fewer layers of jurisdiction, which is what happened with the Confederacy. So there's a lot more confusion, to put it simply. So both sides took executive liberties. Lincoln took liberty to act unilaterally. He defended himself to Congress. They approved his stuff retroactively, so he was good. Jefferson Davis, he wanted to secure greater liberties, but he allowed the states more freedom in the short run. However, he still tried to centralize many aspects, much to the dismay of his cooperating states. So there's a lot of disconnect in the Confederacy related to that issue as well. So they had a lot of problems with their structure and how they handled the war, more than strategic errors. Now, and on power, de Juvenel writes this: but so soon as this people with voting power comprises a majority of persons who have, or think they have, nothing to defend, but are offended by great material inequalities, then starts to set no value on anything but the power which its sovereignty gives it of overthrowing a defective social structure, delivers itself over to the messianic promises of power. In other words, the slave states, they thought they had nothing. They thought things were being taken away or not recognized, and so they tried to take it for themselves. But it was a hollow idea in the first place, because they were way overrepresented in Congress from the very beginning due to the Three-Fifths Compromise. And additionally, the large formation owes its existence to the instinct of domination. The country owes itself to dominating itself and things around it. So people are free to leave a country as they see fit, but provinces must be granted the liberty to do so, even though state participation is contractual in the federal government, but retraction is harder than retention. So if you give up certain things, then it's much harder to retract them. Thank you.